Hello again, everybody. This is Pastor Tony, and welcome to lesson number 7 of our series we've entitled On Purpose. We're teaching you how to discover your God-given, God-inspired, God-originated purpose for your life. And again, that is one of the most essential things, the most important things a person can ever learn is their God-given purpose. Now, we can choose our own ways. The Bible says that, it tells us that we have a free choice. God has always given us a choice to follow His purpose and will or reject it and go our own way. The book of Proverbs says there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is destruction. So why would we want to even go down the path of deciding or trying to come up with our own purpose and plan for life? No, God's already done that, and He is infinitely smarter than you and I, and He knows what's best for us, and He knows what's good for us. So we just need to discover what God has already ordained and called us to be in life, what His purpose is for our life. Again, that is an essential for life. God Himself is a God of purpose. He lives according to purpose. He plans according to His purposes. He carries out daily activities according to His purposes. In other words, He works according to that purpose that He has in and for Himself. And He's very deliberate. I know, we've heard a lot of things that make God seem kind of wishy-washy, that He just basically goes by whims and waves, and, whatever the mood strikes Him, He's just going to do that. Well, God is never like that. You'll never find God just kind of bending and flowing and, que sera, sera, and just kind of being bumped around. No, He is very deliberate because He is a God of purpose. And because we are created, all men are created in His likeness and in His image, we also have purpose for life. That's an essential for our life. There's nothing that's going to satisfy you or fulfill your life like fulfilling or walking according to God's calling, His purpose and plan for our life. And that sense of purpose, when we know God's purpose and we're heading that direction, that doesn't mean we're fulfilling everything that is in that purpose, but once you decide to go that direction, go God's way, submit to His purpose and plan in our life, then things begin to, peace comes into your life. You have a reason for being, and it gives us a sense of focus in life that we wouldn't have before, rather than not having any sense of purpose and just kind of changing with the flow, and like I say many times, like a pinball, just being bumped around in life, and you never know where you're going to end up. But when we have that sense of God direction, that sense of God inspired purpose in our life, and we're following that path for living, we have a sense of purpose. That gives us a discipline for life. That begins to be our motivation for our daily activities. That we're not just kind of reacting and responding to life, but we're actually living according to a deliberate purpose that God has designed and called us to live. Now again, when we're talking about that, we're not just talking about a ministry calling. We're not just trying to call everybody into the fivefold full-time ministry. But everything that God calls you to do, whether it's in a full-time ministry position or not, that's a calling from God. It can be a God-inspired purpose for you doing other things in life, like being a teacher, being a nurse, being a doctor, being a business owner. You may have a business idea and you're a business owner. And if that is from God, then you have that sense of focus, direction, motivation in life, and you're doing it all from Him and for Him. And I tell you, that makes life so much better. It just adds a zeal to your life, an energy and a strength to your life. Gives you a reason to get up in the morning, to go through your daily activities. And when you go to bed at night, you have that sense of satisfaction that I've been on God's plan today. I've been fulfilling work and activities that are in line with God's purpose in life. So again, I just want to make clear on that we're not just talking about ministry per se. Whatever God's purposed and called you to is a ministry. And it's all bigger than you. It's bigger than yourself. And so it's not just going to minister to you and your needs. it's going to, if it's a God-given purpose, a God-inspired calling in life, it's going to be far bigger than you. It's going to affect other people in a positive way around you. You know, we all have a sphere of influence. You know, again, we're not, our drive is not to have our name in lights and have fame and fortune. Really our motivation for life in fulfilling God's purpose is doing it for Him and doing it for His glory. And in doing so, we're going to have a positive effect on those people in our sphere of influence, where it be a big old, you know, sphere or a smaller sphere, is all important and all significant. And again, like we've said before in these lessons prior to this, there's no accidents out there. God knew who you were going to be born. He knew when you were going to be born, what generation you were going to be born into, what nation, what situation you were going to be born into, what family. And He's divined a purpose for that. You're not going to catch God off guard. He already did this before the foundation of the world. He planned a master plan for everyone, but He also got it down to the smallest minute detail and how you fit in and where your purpose is in the grand scheme of things. And that's what makes this so exciting. I love this right here, because this, going through this, really blessed me a number of years ago when the Lord really began to work this out in me. It just took a lot of really the day-to-day decisions out, because they were already made, because I'm following His purpose. I don't have to say, oh, well, I need to go this way or go this way. You know, I know where to go because my purpose is involved there, and that directs my daily activities and life experiences. And that makes things a lot more simple. And I like simple. I don't know about you. We're going to look at someone today who definitely lived according to purpose. In fact, you find out throughout the Word of God, those who really affected things and got their name in here somewhere, they were directed by a God-given, God-inspired purpose and plan for their life. That doesn't mean they were perfect, all right? That certainly doesn't mean they were perfect. If you look in the Hall of Fame of Faith, Hebrews chapter 11, you find a lot of people in there who had they made a lot of mistakes, I can tell you, every single one of them. But yet, by faith, they continued to follow God's plan and purpose for their life. That didn't mean that they knew everything from the beginning. They just began, like we said earlier in the earlier lessons, they just began to follow Him, just submit to God, whatever God wanted. And then God was able to use that submission, their softness of their heart, to direct them into His God-given purpose and plan. Now, we're going to talk about David today. And we're not going to talk about the whole life of David, but some specifics about his life I think are going to be helpful to us in not only finding but following God's purpose and design plan for our life. So let's go over to the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. Just a little background here. David, was not the oldest brother. He was one of the younger ones. In fact, he was tending his father's sheep out in the field. And then Samuel the prophet was sent by God down to the house of Jesse, his dad, to anoint the next king of Israel. And so he went down there and went through all his older brothers, and God just rejected one after another. And Samuel's kind of perplexed. He said, we've gone through all these. He heard from God. And he said, do you not have any more sons somewhere? He said, oh yeah, there's one out there in the field tending the sheep. David called him in. God said, he's the one. And God said, I don't look at the outward things of a person. I look at their inward heart. See, that's more important than anything on the outside. I'm not saying that the outside is not important, but it all begins in the heart. And so David just had that heart. So he was anointed the next king of Israel, but that didn't mean he moved out the next day and went up to the king's palace and started trying to move his way in there and said, don't you know, King Saul, that I am the next king of Israel? No, he stayed in the field. What was he doing? God was preparing him to do that. See, preparation time is part of our purpose. It's built into our purpose. And in fact, you're always going to be preparing for the next step or level in your life. We should never discount preparation time. Even if it looks like nothing's happening, we're not doing anything, that preparation time is never wasted time. And so David was out in the field, and over a course of time, Israel entered into battle with the Philistines, their enemy. And so one day, Jesse, David's father, sent David down to the battle to take some cheeses and bread and those kind of things to his army, and particularly his sons, and find out how they were doing. So David went down there, and while he was down there, he saw that everybody was arrayed for battle. Then he saw Goliath, the giant, come out. And boy, he was a big boy. We're not talking about just a tall basketball player here, 6, 7 foot tall, 6.5, 7 foot tall. Giants in those days, and it's estimated that Goliath himself was somewhere in between 9 and 12 feet tall. If you had him on your basketball team, man, you were going to win, all right? He could slam dunk and not even jump. So he was a big boy, and he was muscular, I'm sure, and well-trained, well-armed, and he came out there and challenged Israel. He said, send somebody out here. He's actually looking for King Saul. King Saul was out hiding out. But he said, send me somebody out here to fight with me. And whoever wins that WWF SmackDown battle out here, then the other nation, the other army, will serve that one who wins. And so rather than taking the challenge, the nation of Israel, all the Israeli army was hiding. They went running and hiding behind the rocks. But while David was down there, he overheard Goliath threatening, saying the things that he did. And so he didn't hear it like everybody else. You see, it's not just what you see and what you hear, it's how you see it and how you hear it. And rather than being struck and paralyzed with fear, David was a man of purpose. He had already learned this. He had already learned this in the sheepfold. He already learned how he could depend on God out there. And so he started asking people. He said, well, what's going to happen, or what's going to be given to the guy who goes out there and accepts Goliath's challenge and defeats him? See, he was looking for an opportunity. While everybody else is looking for a rock to hide behind, David heard things differently. He saw this as an opportunity right here. And so they said, well, you get the king's daughter, first of all. You live in the king's palace. Those are pretty good things. Then he said, you'll not have to pay taxes anymore. Well, that probably really got his attention. All right. And so he asked around, and sure enough, he asked other people, but his older brother Eliab overheard him talking. And this is where we want to pick it up. And we're going to see how Eliab, the older brother of David, reacted, what he said. Verse 28 of 1 Samuel 17. It says, now Eliab, the oldest brother, heard when he had spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, why did you come down here? See, that's typical of an older brother to a younger brother, isn't it? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? Now notice that. He said, who have you left those few sheep? In other words, he's trying to belittle him and cause him to be insignificant in his own eyes. He's trying to whittle him down in his purpose, his God-given purpose. And see, people will do that. People even close to you. Many times they will try to belittle you. They'll try to ridicule you. They'll try to, you'll tell them something or convey your vision, your purpose for life. And your purpose for life is always going to be too big for you to handle anyway on your own. God intends, when he gives you a purpose, that he's going to help you fulfill that. It's going to take God-sized resources, power, strength, and ability to fulfill completely a God-sized vision and calling. And so we see that Eliab was just kind of whittling him down, trying to anyway, and that just didn't work. He said, I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Now look at verse 29. And David said, what have I done now? As typical younger brother, what have I done now? I haven't done anything. I was just asking some questions, inquiring on some things. And so his older brother is trying to get on him. And David said, what have I done now? And then he makes this statement right here. He says, is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? Is there not a purpose? Not a cause here. And see, where Eliab and the rest of the armies of Israel could not see the God-given purpose and the cause here, David could. And he was going to answer that. He was going to answer. And this was a lot bigger than David. this whole thing was a lot bigger than David. But David already understood how to handle himself. So let's skip on down. So, King Saul finally heard about David and what he was asking and what he was saying out there. And so he called for him. And we're going to go down to verse 33. And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go up against this Philistine to fight with him. For you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth." So we got the second guy here that's in authority, over David's head, naturally speaking. Just tell him you can't do it. You just can't do it. Well, say they didn't see things the way David did, and David wasn't going to be talked out of it. And see, the enemy will many times, he'll try to talk you out, whatever excuse he can come up with. Here is, you're too young. Then he'll tell you you're too old. And he'll tell you you're not smart enough, don't have enough education. He'll say, well, you're overqualified, you have too much education. You came from the wrong family, came from the wrong nation, the wrong state. He'll just go on down the list to see if you'll say, yeah, I can't do it because of that right there. But Saul was trying to talk him out of it. So verse 34, and David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lion out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and struck it and killed it." You're seeing somebody right here who has got a God-sized vision, a God-sized purpose. See, your vision is always going to come from your purpose. Your vision is your ability to see something that nobody else can. And so David could see opportunity here when nobody else saw it. And it was based on his experience. Remember that prep time out there? Keeping those few sheep out there in the wilderness? His father asked him to do or commanded him to do. What happened? Well, over the course of time, here comes a lion. Grabs one of the lamb, take it off. A bear comes, takes a lamb, takes it off. Well, all David knew was, I'm commanded to keep these sheep. Now, a lot of people would just say, we'll just let them have that one lamb. We got all these other flock out here. David was not going to give in to anything. He was not going to allow not a lion, a bear to take one lamb from his flock. Not one of them going to be lost. So you know what? He chased them down. He rescued the lamb, and when the lion and the bear rose up against him, what did he do? He took it by its beard. I mean, he was that close to it. He didn't catch it by the tail, didn't go lay a trap for it, caught it by its beard and smote it. This is David here. Now, what gave him this fearlessness right here? It was that God-given purpose and vision that was just consuming him on the inside. And see, he just carried that over. He said, I've already learned how to deal with this stuff. And so in verse 36, he says, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine. Now, that's important. He didn't call him a giant. He called him an uncircumcised Philistine. In other words, that big fella out there does not have a covenant with God. God's not on his side. He's on my side. So it wasn't just David going out there and just trying to make a name for himself. What was David doing? Well, it turns out that he was trying to glorify the name of God. His God-given purpose was bigger than David. It was bigger than what he could do. And he had already learned to trust in God and rely on God's ability under the covenant. And he said this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine, is just going to be like one of them, just like the lion and the bear, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Verse 37, moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. I tell you, that's awesome. See, but what is he? How's he seeing things? There is God-given purpose and calling. But see, God-given purpose and calling means God's in this, helping me to fulfill this. Now that's really, really big right there. That you see in your God-given purpose, even though it's bigger than you, it's over your head, it's not over God's head. Yeah, the giant was bigger than David, but he wasn't bigger than God. See, David's whole outlook and perspective. See, when you get a God-sized purpose, calling, plan, and vision burning on the inside of you in your heart, you're going to have a different perspective than everybody else. People will try to talk you out of it. They'll try to belittle you. They'll try to put you over and say, well, you just can't do this because of this and this and this and this and this. But you don't ever allow anyone, devil, anybody, to steal and get you out of God's purpose and plan for your life. See, there's a built-in persecution system out in the world that when you try to venture outside of their limitations, their confinements, their corral, so to speak, then they're going to try to put pressure on you to get you back over in that. Because, first of all, it challenges them to step out beyond their own security and their own trust in themselves. But it also says that there's God is bigger than whatever else I'm facing out there. And so when David tried to get outside of that corral, boy, they rose up. Eliab, the oldest brother, you know, now King Saul, tried to round him up and get him back in the fence. Well, David, he's just a maverick. He's not going to do that, I can tell you right now. He was burning with zeal and burning with this God-given purpose for his life. And so David said, he's going to deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Let's go on down to 42. Now he goes out to battle and he approaches the uncircumcised Philistine, Goliath. Verse 42, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So now he had people close to him, his oldest brother, and then King Saul, saying you can't do it. Now you got the Philistine, the Goliath, said he began to probably laugh and ridicule him, disdain him, put him down. He said, well, who is this? You know, he was expecting Saul or some big guy to come out there with a lot of armor and a lot of stuff, and boy, we're going to have a smackdown right here in the middle of all this. And then here comes a little shepherd boy out there, no armor, none of that stuff. He has a slingshot and 5 smooth stones. That's all he had. But that's all he needed. All right. So Philistine started trying to whittle him down. David just turned a deaf ear to that. See, when you have the God-given purpose on the inside of you and it's established, it's planted, it becomes bigger than everything else. When the calls of Christ and the calls of God inside of you, the calling of God in your life become bigger than everything else, you're going to run through these obstacles. You're going to run through all this negative, naysaying opinion saying, well, you just can't do it. Because you're not going to be talked out of it. Because the same God that called you to do it doesn't expect you to do it on your own. He's also empowered you, enabled you, anointed you to get it done. You have to know that. Maybe you're not perfect. Maybe you don't know all these things. But you need to go through that preparation time and see it God's on your side. So verse 43. So the Philistines said to David, am I a dog that you should come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Oh, I tell you what, that probably fired David up big time, because he had a zeal for God right here. Verse 44, and the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword. Now, you know, Philistine said his stuff. But don't ever let the devil or any of that kind of negative talk get the last word in on you. No, David opened his mouth. And I tell you, we never heard from Goliath again after that. David said to Goliath, verse 45, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. See, I believe that's exactly the way he went against that lion and that bear out there. Same thing. He came at them in the name of the Lord of hosts. He didn't go get his Kevlar on. He didn't go get all this bear fighting equipment and lion fighting equipment on. He ran after him, but he knew he was covered by the shield of God. God was his shield and exceeding great reward. And see, that's what gave him that fearlessness. Knowing God was on his side. Being filled and consumed with a God-sized purpose, calling, and vision made him bigger than the situation on the outside. I think it was Smith Wigglesworth used to say it this way, I'm a lot bigger on the inside than I am on the outside. Well, I think David was saying that. I think that's exactly what he's saying right here. I'm a lot bigger on the inside than I am on the outside. And so, verse 46, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. There's the purpose, to glorify God. It was bigger than David. I tell you what, God-sized purpose is always going to, when it's carried out, when it's fulfilled in faith, then it's going to bring glory to God. And other people are going to see the glory of God in this whole thing. Now notice that David's vision was not just to defeat Goliath. His actual vision was to defeat the armies of the Philistines, to feed their carcasses to the birds of the air. I'm telling you what, you're talking about somebody, if you got around him, he's going to rub off on you real quick. And so verse 47, then all of this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Verse 48, so it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried. He ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Verse 49, then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth, face plant, big time. Verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head. And notice, and when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. You know why? Because David was after them next, and they heard what he said. Hey, I tell you, David took him down quick. Now he comes out there with this big shield in front, shield bearer, all this armor from head to toe, big old boy out there. Really about the only thing that you could really see was about this opening here. And David ran back, took one sling of that one stone and shot it like a 30-30 bullet, and it sank in his head right here. He fell over on his face. David went over there and got his own sword and cut his head off. I tell you what, that would be more than a rated R version of any movie right there, what we're seeing right there. And I tell you, the Philistines took off and fled. And then the armies of Israel, all of a sudden, they came out behind the rocks and began to chase the Philistines. Well, see, they were looking for somebody who was fearless, who was consumed with a God-given purpose, who was not only just, trying to do it, he was full bore ahead getting it done. And see, that's the kind of person David was. And we have the same God. We have the same God purpose on the inside of us. Maybe it's not to slay a Goliath. Maybe it's not to do something along those lines. But whatever your God purpose is, it's going to be bigger than you. It's going to affect other people. It's going to help lead people and glorify God. And I tell you, that's what we should be about. Well, that's all the time I've got for this lesson. We got carried away today. Join us again in the next lesson. We're going to pick up right from here. If you'd like additional materials and resources, you can always visit us on the web, tonycowan.org. We'll see you in the next lesson.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. We hope that it really blessed you. Hope you got a lot out of it. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you also turn on the notifications so that you get notified whenever we post a new video. Also, go ahead and hit that like button. And if God's doing awesome things in your life like we're believing Him for, then we would love for you to share that with us. So leave us a comment. Let us know all the good things God's doing in your life. We'll see you next time.